CharityVillage. We are so happy partners on the podcast and, of course, with this webinar. So I just want one more housekeeping thing. The difference between question and chat. So there's the questions and then there's chat. I'm going to ask you to put some information in the chat from time to time that aren't questions, but I want to hear from you and I want to make sure that I'm understanding where you are and get your feedback as we go through so that this is really valuable to you. So when I'm asking you to weigh in on something or tell me that you hear, understand, or familiar or experience that, tell me in the chat. That way it's easier for us to manage the actual questions and make sure that we get through all the questions when you have something that needs more specific advice.
And just to clarify, Cindy, I'm going to jump right in there for 1 second. It's possible that the participants may not actually have a chat function. That might be for us broadcasting out to them. Yeah, okay. So if you don't see a chat, do weigh in the question box, and we'll monitor that as well. Like that.
I can't find it. I see some highs. So let me know if you can find the chat. And if you can't find it, then I'll know. It looks like that might not be, no chat. Okay, well then you can put those in questions and I will try and minimize some of that for you. So first of all, welcome. As Marina mentioned, my name is Cindy Wagman. I am the founder and CEO of The Good Partnership, and we help small charities, predominantly in Canada, with their fundraising. And personally, I have fundraised for a whole range of organizations from very small, where I was the first and only hired fundraiser, to being in a senior fundraising position at one of the country's largest fundraising institutions. So I've seen it all. And my passion is with small charities and small nonprofits. And so I've taken all that experience and it informs all the work that we do with smaller organizations and the information we share with small organizations. So that's a high level about me. I hate those traditional bios, so that's all you're going to get. You can certainly look me up on our website or anything like that to find more of the tech and specs. So I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you, first of all, for being here. I know you all have really busy days. This is a crazy time of year for everyone, so thank you. I really appreciate it, and I really hope we can give you something of value. And I also want to say thank you for the great work that you are doing. Most of us are not in this sector for the pay. We are in it because we are driven to make change in the world. And in my experience, staff and volunteers of nonprofits and charities are not thanked enough. So thank you. I see you. I appreciate you. And I love what you're doing. It's amazing. I want to start with a little bit of fundraising real talk, because I hear all these things all the time in small organizations, and then I feel like no one really talks about them. So fundraising in small organizations can feel a little crazy making, right? I was going to ask you to tell me a little bit about how fundraising makes you feel. So you can put that in the questions, but tell me, what are your fundraising pet peeves? How do you feel about fundraising? I'm going to come and sneak in. Stressed, a lot of stress. Yeah, exhausting, lots of work, more time, defeated, rejections, not easy, not good. Like you're annoying people. Oh my God, we're going to talk about that for sure. Limitations. Oh my God, I can't even keep up with all these comments. Fun. Yay, I have one person who thinks it's fun. Isolated. Yes, Andre, we hear that and see that when we go into organizations all the time. Fun but tiring. You hate asking for things, Emily. Don't worry. Lorraine says fulfilling. I can't keep up with all the comments, but staff don't understand, lonely, all these challenging, all these things we hear all the time. So thank you for sharing that. I can't even keep up. Oh, we can't ask for overhead. So many things, so many things. So here's my fundraising pet peeve. we need to host a gala. Such and such organization just raised $1 million in one night. Why can't we do the same? Or my other that I hear all the time is, let's write a letter to Oprah. And I've had to do this. I had to literally put a letter in the mail to Oprah with, of course, no reply. I've heard Ellen DeGeneres, Warren Buffett. Of course, there's like a whole list of local philanthropists that everyone always talks about. Drives me crazy. Another one is we need to invest in our brand. Like that is going to automatically unlock all the fundraising potential. Do you have your a favorite pet peeve when it comes to fundraising, something you hear all the time? I'm getting a lot of ha 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 galas. Yeah, social media. Yeah, like what, like all of a sudden if you just have a Twitter strategy, you're gonna start raising more money. That's not that hard. Oh my God, yeah, like I get the both, like, oh, just go and do it. It's not that hard. Or every time I meet someone, they say, you're a fundraiser? That's so hard. How do you do that? I could never do that. Over-reliance on social media, grant writing, yeah, like same thing. Grants are gonna automatically just alleviate all of our funding pressures. And of course, grants can be amazing, but it's what happens when they leave. Oh, appealing only to rich people. Yes, I wrote a whole thesis in my undergrad around grassroots fundraising, not just being about, you know, those really big checks. So yeah, so much. Thank you for sharing all of those. I think there's a lot we all collectively experience in this space. So fundraising in small shops definitely has its own challenges. The other big one for me that drives me a little crazy is when everyone compares you to big organizations. Right now, I feel like the big one is Charity Water. I'm seeing that all over the place, and I just want to like scream because it's unfair. It's totally unfair to compare our small organizations that are grassroots and, you know, just struggling to keep the lights on with these huge organizations, and Charity Water in particular talks about zero overhead. It's because they have a separate organization where the donors are funding their overhead. So yes, it is very hard, I think, to operate a small organization today when we're constantly being compared to these organizations that have huge budgets and huge teams, etc. Now, we got a question that I want to just take a moment. So someone asked, what is small? And it's self-defined. I think you can, typically we look at organizations that are raising less than $1 million a year. But all of this will apply regardless of your size, even if you're medium, let's say under 10 million, but most of the organizations we work with have fundraising revenue under $500,000, sometimes even under 100,000. So in Canada, we're really fortunate to have a lot of government funding, and that totally skews the fundraising realities with the operational realities of organizations. But I hope that makes sense. But if you feel like you're in a small shop, you're in a small shop. And definitely a lot of this applies across the board. So it's particularly hard because we're being compared to these organizations that have staff dedicated to all these different things, like fundraisers, communications, administrators. So just tell me one more time in the questions, who's doing your fundraising? Is it you? Are you the executive director? Do you have a fundraising staff? I'm seeing me. I'm doing everything. Alone, volunteer, board of directors, CEO, lots of just me. ED, you are the ED. Chelsea, everyone on the team, that's awesome. So yeah, a lot of executive directors here, which means you don't have a fundraising staff. Wow. Again, I can't even keep up with all the answers, but yeah, just a lot of people doing it on their own. So thank you, because I know you're doing it off the side of your plate, right? This is in addition to all the other responsibilities that you have. And we can't expect the same results as an organization that has, big private donors funding all their overhead, and then all the other donor money goes to direct programs, and they have teams and teams and teams of marketers and fundraisers and all of that. So, yeah, thank you. So we have one goal today. I want you to learn how to fundraise in a way that feels good and less stressful. And I want you to stop competing and start thriving. So, are you ready? Let me know one more time in the questions. Poor CharityVillage team is going to have a hard time sorting through these at the end. Thank you for your patience. But yeah, we're ready to go. Let me know. This sounds like, yeah. Oh, can't keep up. Let's do it. Amazing. So, how do we find the right fundraising strategies for our organizations and then be successful in implementing them? That really, to me, is the crux of what we talk about. Stop comparing, stop competing. Let's figure out what we're going to be successful at right now. And so there's 3 things we're going to cover in today's webinar. Number 1, reimagining fundraising in a way that makes it mission critical and fundamental to your work. Number 2, how to focus your few resources on the fundraising things that will have the biggest impact for you right now. And how to build meaningful relationships so you don't feel like you're chasing money. So what's really holding you back? Most people's frustrations with fundraising have nothing to do with fundraising. It has to do with our feelings about money and wealth. And we're all in our jobs because of the mission, right? We are driven by passion, by this need to change the world. And certainly we're not being paid that much compared to other industries. But generally in society, we're not supposed to talk about money, right? It's one of those taboo topics. And so we think that fundraising is all about talking about money. And it's really uncomfortable. But fundraising really isn't actually all about talking about money. And good fundraising, you're almost never talking about money until it comes time to make that ask. I want you to think about fundraising as matchmaking. Forget the money for a minute and think about the love. Do you love your charity? I hope you do. Chances are you do. Most of the people I meet in our sector love the work that they do. And so what do you love about it? What keeps you going into the office every day? We do this work because we love it. We love the impact that we have on the people that we serve and the communities we serve. We're proud to lead the changes we want to see in our world. And we put our hearts and souls into it every day. That's love. And guess what? Your donors, they love your organization too. Maybe in a bit of a different way, probably not as nuanced as you do, because we see that all the time. You know, our donors don't know the ins and outs. But they give with their hearts. And that is the most important thing to remember. People give because it makes them feel good. And they love the act of giving. And once you start to understand that fundraising is matchmaking, a couple really fun things happen. So, first go. Okay. Your job is to find people who will fall in love with your organization. That is fundraising. And when you start to understand that, you start to learn that there are plenty of fish in the sea. So I don't want you spending time trying to convert people to your cause. I want you to find the people who already care about your cause and try and build a meaningful relationship so that they start to understand that they can have an impact by giving to your cause. So a lot of people think that just because someone has money, that they should be willing to just give it to your organization. I'm sure you've heard that from people. I hear it all the time. But when it comes to fundraising as matchmaking, the first thing I want you to think about is, do they have that passion? And so I give this example a lot. For an environmental organization, your job is not to convince people that climate change is a problem. Your job as a fundraiser, maybe as an ED or programmer or communications person, but as a fundraiser, your job is not to convince people that climate change is real. Your job is to find the people who are concerned about climate change and show them that they can have an impact by supporting your organization. And they can do the things that they think are important. Does that make sense? The other thing that happens is when you think about fundraising as matchmaking, you realize you don't propose on the first date. I see this all the time, organizations feeling like they need that pitch deck so they can walk into a room and make the ask and wow everyone. But you don't necessarily need to go in with a hard pitch. And in fact, the best fundraising is fundraising where you engage your donors and listen to them and build that relationship so that the proposal, in this case, is not a surprise, right? Like, I mean, you can make it a little bit fun and surprising, but it shouldn't be a surprise, right? You don't want to like propose to someone who's not ready to commit. And that's totally true in fundraising. You want to ask when the time is right, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But it doesn't happen overnight, and it's important to realize that. And finally, as I mentioned before, love is mutual. People give because it makes them feel good too. I've had $1 million donors as well as like $50 donors thanking me when they give because it feels so good to them. So regardless of what kind of fundraising you do, I want you to always remember that. People don't give, and certainly your best donors are not the ones who feel bad giving. You want to create a system where your donors feel amazing in their giving. Here's this great graphic from my friends at Agents of Good that sort of describes a little bit around the misconception of the ask. So as I mentioned before, go right in with an ask. You work at building a relationship, and the ask, even this to me feels like too big of a circle to represent, how much time you should be spending on asking. The rest is relationship building, thanking donors, reporting back to them, building those relationships so that they sustain and they're part of your community and you're tapping in to that love. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's really easy to get sucked into the vortex of so-and-so organization does this, and so that's what we should do. So I want you to focus on the right things, and I'm going to give you the tools to be able to do that. So to do this, the first thing is you need to know and understand where you are right now. You should, I say should, and I'll tell you why I'm laughing, you should have a good sense so far about where your money is coming from. If you're raising money, you might not be raising any money and you need to know that. But where is the money coming from? What are people responding to? If your whole thing just looks like a lot of unsolicited donations, that's a problem. Are you able to keep track and understand what triggers people to give to your organization? So, are you using direct mail, email, in-person asks, events, peer-to-peer fundraising, Facebook fundraising, now a thing in Canada? So where are your donations coming from right now? And if you have no donations, literally, who are the people closest to your organization? Where might they come from with the least amount of work? So you can take a second and write this down because you're going to come back to this. I want you to start to, everything you do going forward should sort of be grounded in your reality today, right? You're not going to raise $1 million tomorrow if you're raising $10,000 today. And so to have a good picture of where you need to go next, you need to understand where you are. And what your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are. We all love a good SWOT analysis, but this is actually really important So if you have, if your strength is that you are really community-based and you have lots of supporters who give at, well, you know, at the sort of broad-based level, and a weakness is that you have no access to major gift donors, don't start a major gift fundraising program. Leverage your strength, leverage your opportunities, try overcome some of your weaknesses and threats. But again, you need to spell, sorry, my mouse keeps moving ahead. You need to spell out what those opportunities look like, because that needs to inform these decisions. And most importantly, I believe, is you need to know your donors. And you can do a donor avatar, or, you know, something that starts to understand who your donors are. What do they value? Where are they? Where are they in person? What are they doing outside of work? Where are they working? What are they doing outside of work? Where are they living? Where are they hanging out online? All of these things will help you understand what strategy is going to work for your organization. And there are lots of different ways to get to know your donors. My two favorites, one is donor surveys. So when you are communicating with your donors by email, by mail, social media, you can take that opportunity to hear from your donors, and you can ask them demographic information or what their favorite social media is. You can ask them like small little questions, or you can ask them deep, meaningful questions about your work. So I just had a conversation, again, with Jen from Agents of Love, talking about these sort of, I can't remember what they're called, but when you send a donation appeal, you give people, as part of the reply, an opportunity to share why they give, or what message they have for the people they're impacting, or for the work, or for the staff. And you start to collect this information about why donors are giving, what they're passionate about, how they talk about your work. And those are things that will help you understand your donors. I have this great example by my friend Brock Warner, who works at War Child, and he had a survey. Sorry, oops, wrong way. He had a survey. My mouse, I'm not used to it, where they put in a lot of information that we as charities don't usually ask for. So I'll read this to you. Someone tweeted at them, I just took a survey you sent me by email. Last several questions were about semi-personal information. What is the last song I listened to? If I could travel anywhere, where? Etc. I'd like to know the relevance of these questions to your organization and my donations to it. So Brock responded, hi Gary, great question. So first of all, he's responding quickly, and he's taking the time to answer. That's important, just as a side note. We're trying to learn a bit more about the values and interests of our supporters. We could ask you your age, but that would just tell us that your age, not much more. We want to create articles, reports, email updates, videos, thank yous that feel personal and meaningful to you. We felt those questions, which are optional, might show some trends or not. If 40% of our supporters said the last song they listened to was classical or country or EDM, that would be much more interesting than your age. Knowing where you'd like to travel might give us a glimpse into your worldview. Or not. There's no wrong answer. For some people, the world is their backyard. For others, their backyard is their backyard. Both are good in my books. Lastly, and goes on to say, it's not, we're not keeping track. So this is such a great example of how some of that information you can think about collecting and informing what you're doing. And then, of course, Gary replied, thank you for taking the time, and he understands. So love that. Definitely use donor surveys a lot. The other is donor meetings. So this is my personal favorite because if you ask your donors, they're actually going to tell you a lot of really valuable information, but we're not so good at asking. And so I hope you've heard the fundraising adage, ask for money, get advice. Ask for advice, get money. And this is true. And so I want you to reach out to your donors and sit down with them face to face or have a phone call and ask for advice and feedback. And again, it doesn't have to, like, all this information that you can collect can inform your fundraising in some really creative and meaningful ways. And so as you think about building your fundraising strategy, you want to take that information and leverage it and use that as a starting point. So as homework, if you don't already meet with your donors to get their feedback, I want you to do that. I want you to do that in the next 2 weeks, to reach out to someone who's given already to your organization at a high amount, or what feels high to you and to your organization. So that could be $1,000, that can be $500, or even $200. And of course, if you're large, it could be $10,000. But I want you to sit down and listen. So you can have a couple sort of starter questions, but in my experience, the number one top quality of a good fundraiser is curiosity. It's the ability to listen to what people are saying and then further them on by asking really good questions. And that is your task when you meet with donors, at least in the beginning, when you're building those relationships or trying to figure out what your fundraising strategy should be. Now, this can feel vulnerable for people because you're kind of opening yourself up to the potential for criticism, or, you know, people might challenge you on certain things. And so I want you to be really open-minded and understand that you're not going to solve everything in that meeting. So you don't actually need to reply. If someone says, oh, I think you should do this, or you're doing this wrong, or this would be really great, whatever it is, your answer is, thank you, that's really valuable feedback, and we'll take that back and start to think about how we can leverage that. And so you're not promising anything, and you're not committing to anything in the meeting. You're just, you are just there to listen. Sorry. We got a question. When you set a meeting, what do you ask them? So I would ask them for feedback. You could say, depending on who you're asking, you know, you're a significant donor to us. We might not have expressed this as much in the past as we'd like to, but we really value your support. And we would love to talk to you about your experience as a donor. I'd love your feedback as we start to grow as an organization. And that could be like a good intro. And then in terms of a good opening question, it really depends. I always start with small talk because it's personal, right? It's a relationship. But I would say, I'm just trying to think of an actual example. Thanks for meeting. You know, I'm really excited. We've never met before in person, but you've been giving for a long time, and we're so grateful. I'd love to know, and there's tons of resources, and I'm going to share with you one of our free resources around donor meetings. But you know, I'd love to learn more about why you started giving to our organization. So simple, but they're going to tell you so much, and that's going to get them talking, and then you can riff off that. So does it make sense? There's so much value in donor meetings and donor surveys, but the most important thing for me is that this is your intel. So when someone says to you, we want to try this fundraising strategy or tactic, and you're like, well, here's what we're hearing from the donors. That's not going to fly. Or all of our donors are saying this one thing, we should really pay attention. And so you start to see the opportunities in a different way, and it's grounded in your reality. And in my experience, your donors are going to tell you exactly what you need to do to get more money from them. So that's a bonus. And this really is the foundation to your fundraising strategy. Then, of course, once you know where you are and what your opportunities are and how they intersect with your donors, you can start to choose which fundraising tactics are right for your organization. So we've put together a little cheat sheet, and again, I'm going to tell you how you can download this right here, thegoodpartnership.com/CV. Let me see if I can put that in the notes here. I'm going to show you what it looks like. Sorry, in the chat. So hopefully you can all see that. But here's what we've done. We've listed all of the fundraising tactics that we could think of. If you think of more, let me know. We'll add them. And what you need to consider as you think about if this is right for your organization. So corporate sponsorship, primary solicitation, there's a glossary as well that talks about what all this means. But this is a marketing-based relationship. Companies, when they're giving through sponsorship, they want to have reach. And so your donor demographic and community should match that of those corporate sponsors. Cultivation cycle, how long does it take for you to be able to get that money in the door? Gift size. So there's all these different considerations that that you need to think about to know if this is the right strategy for you. So there's no one size fits all, but you can start to see where the opportunities are and how they're aligned with your organization. So we've listed here, I have them all here, like monthly giving, peer-to-peer, crowdfunding, medium gifts, giving circle, all of these things, major gift, planned giving, small events, gala events, third-party events, do-it-yourself events. And if you don't know what those are, don't worry. This lays it all out. You can download your copy there. I'm not going to be able to go into all of these different strategies and tactics because there's too many of you and too many of these. But in the same way that fundraising is matchmaking your organization with your donor, this is the same thing. You want to find that fit. What is going to connect with where you are today and where you can be successful? And then the other things you want to consider is what's realistic, right? So how do you know which one of these is right? Like, don't do everything. Pick one that you can do really well, or two, no more than 3 or 4. Build on what you've already been doing, what complements that. Understand your donors. Things like, do you have mailing addresses or email addresses? All of these should factor into your decisions around which fundraising strategies work for you. And if you do all these things and keep involving your donors in that feedback process, you're going to be on the right track. If you're curious and you listen and you focus. Can you do that? Does that sound good? It has to be grounded in your realities. I know as small organizations, it's tough to find time to do anything. So that needs to be considered as you pick what fundraising strategies and tactics you want to do. All right, I'm going to just look. I know there's some questions here. I think we've been answering most of them as we go, but let me just...
Cindy, I can jump in there. We've got a question about adding the PayPal Giving Fund and Facebook fundraisers to that list of strategies that you had there. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Thank you. I might have missed Facebook. I was intending to add it, and then it might have got left out. So I will make sure. Yes, you're right. So yes, Facebook is really interesting right now, and the PayPal Giving Fund. And again, like if you find that all your donors or your community is on Facebook, that is a great strategy. In the past, I would have said social media and Facebook, not a huge source of fundraising revenue. They might be a tool to acquire emails and all that, but that's changing. 100% that is different now, and it's going to keep changing over the next little while. So yes, thank you. I will add that. It is definitely a strategy, but figure out where it sits around your priorities. So if you have 10 Facebook followers, I wouldn't start with a Facebook fundraising strategy, right? I mean, it feels obvious, but it's not always obvious. So understanding, like if you have a huge Facebook following, great. If you want to invest in Facebook as fundraising as a strategy, maybe look at complementing that with growing your Facebook following. So all these things are connected and linked together. But yes, that is absolutely one that I meant to put on there. Thank you.
We had a couple questions also about Canada Helps. Actually, a few questions about Canada Helps, and then another question about crowdfunding.
Yes. Oh, did I leave crowdfunding out too? I was trying so hard to get this done for all of you today. So Canada Helps is an online giving platform. So it is a place where your donors transact with you. Most of the time, they're not discovering your organization through it. So you want your donors to be able to give online. Generally, that is true today for all your organizations. Canada Helps is an amazing resource if you don't have a donor database or something where donors can give online otherwise. It's so easy to embed on your site. It looks good. It's relatively friction-free, but it's not a source of discovery. So it wouldn't be a fundraising strategy. It's more of a tool or part of your systems, if that makes sense. Crowdfunding, I thought I had that on there, but maybe it got missed. Oh, here you go. Crowdfunding is on there too. So crowdfunding is, sorry, I just like pointed. You have no idea where I'm pointing. Right in the middle there. So crowdfunding or peer-to-peer are very similar when you're relying on your community to ask on your behalf and to ask their networks. So crowdfunding is typically, you're just asking everyone to contribute. It's a very marketing strategy, and typically it's towards a goal. Whereas peer-to-peer might be a little bit more broadly, but it's actually very similar. And some of the considerations, as you'll see in this, is that you need to be communicating all the time, both asking and thanking and updating. So that cycle of ask, thank, report is like on fast forward during that process. So you still have to do all those things, but like in super speed. All right, any other questions, Marina, before?
No, I think we can move on from there, Cindy. Okay. Thanks.
No problem. Let me find my spot. So, I mean, I wanted to check in. That was great. And certainly if you guys have questions, keep asking them. Oh, there's my little. So once you know which of those you want to focus on, you need to put them into a plan. And a plan is not like, in 3 years from now, we want to have a culture of philanthropy, or we want to diversify our revenue. Yes, you want those two things. Everyone wants those two things. A plan is, we want, let's use Facebook as an example. We want to invest in Facebook fundraising. What does that look like? Does that mean that we need to increase our Facebook followers? That means we should be running ads. If we're a locally based organization, those ads should be geographically targeted. We want to target people who like these things or who have these qualities. Or you might want to look at importing your email list and targeting those people to like your Facebook page. And you want to set up ads that target those people with the conversion goal of liking your Facebook page. And then you want to send people more information about how they can set up a Facebook fundraiser. Right now, your organization cannot independently set up that fundraiser. It has to be a third party on your behalf raising money for you. So what a plan looks like is, okay, it's December 6th right now. Next week, we're going to input our Facebook email list into our our email list into our Facebook account. The week after, we're going to set up ads that target those people and ask them to like our page. Then come January, or like come this national day that aligns with our charity, we're going to email all of our people and run Facebook ads asking them to set up Facebook fundraisers for us. So that is a plan. And I say this because we see so many organizations get lost in implementation. In fact, as a company, that's what we specialize in, because we know how hard it is to take these ideas and turn them into action. But that is, number one, the most important thing you can do. It is the biggest barrier. And so think about what's realistic. What can you do? If major gifts is a priority, maybe it's every week you're going to phone one donor and ask for a meeting, or do 2 donor meetings at their offices, or meet them for coffee. Whatever the case may be, you need to understand what actions are necessary for you to be successful. And again, how to know which of those actions you should be prioritizing goes back to, in summary, where are you right now? Where are your donors? What do you know about them? And what are they telling you about themselves? And that way you can build an action plan that reflects your reality. And I promise you, just stick with it. Consistency is the other big piece of it. So taking action consistently, you will start to see results. And of course, those results will be reflected based on the strategies you pick. So it's all kind of interdependent, but I hope that I've given you some tools to better evaluate what your fundraising should look like in a way that feels relatable to where you are today in your organization and not overwhelming. You can't do it all. You can't, I mean, the best thing I love about a plan is that it gives you permission to say no. You can say, oh yeah, we thought about that strategy, but you know what, here's why we decided against it, because we don't have a marketing reach and we don't have people who can open doors into companies. And so yes, corporate giving is important, although it's a small part of giving in Canada. It just looks a lot bigger than it is, but you know, we've thought about that, but here's what our donors are telling us. Here's where our strengths are, and here's why we've made the decision to do this, and we're saying no to this. Because being able to say no is hugely powerful for you in your organization when you don't have time, when you're wearing a bazillion hats, and fundraising is just one of those small responsibilities that you have to do. And I want you to be able to focus it on the things that are going to make you feel good and get results, and that are aligned with what's realistic for where you're at today. So I hope that makes sense. This is so good. Thank you. Who is that? Karen, my pleasure. Yes, Facebook ads do cost money, but they're relatively inexpensive. And again, like, you have to know and understand what, based on all those factors, like if your weakness is that you have zero fundraising budget, then you don't want to be spending money on Facebook ads. Especially if you don't have a track record of understanding. You don't want to be spending money on events if you have no budget. You want to be focusing on things like that are very high touch, relationship based, or leveraging lots of free resources. And obviously considering time as a resource as well. Your time, volunteers' time, all of that is really important. I feel like you're going to hop in with a question, Marina.
Yeah, we've got lots and lots of questions, great questions coming in. So thank you, everybody. Keep them coming. But let's, I want to deal with one that has come up from a number of folks. So if this was your question, you are not alone. Cindy, can you offer some advice for those that don't yet have donors or don't have a donor list? How do they get started?
Yeah. So my answer with everything, and I'm sorry, is always it depends, because it does depend on where you are right now and what resources you have available to you. So with fundraising, there's this sort of graphic that we love to use when we teach Fundraising 101, which is these concentric circles. So going back to that idea of fundraising as matchmaking, I want you to think about who you can connect with, who's going to be most passionate about your work. Chances are those are your board members, your volunteers, and the people who are closest to you, depending on the type of organization you're at. Obviously, sometimes it can be clients, sometimes it can't be clients, but start by finding the passionate people. and ask them for help, ask them for feedback and advice. And I'm usually pretty straightforward. We need to fundraise, and I feel like you are someone who's passionate about the work that we're doing. I'd love to talk to you about your advice, feedback. Is this something you think you could support? And then you start to grow from there. I just gave a presentation at a conference around these small events that are donor hosted, so obviously if you don't have donors, sub that with your volunteers or your board members. Have them invite their networks to come and learn more about your organization. You can ask them, or you can follow up and ask them. If you think about that matchmaking insight, it will help guide that strategy, which is, how are you going to find the people that care? And understanding who those people are after that will help you figure out which of the fundraising strategies to look at. And what can you do to get in front of them? Usually it's starting with the people closest to your organization and giving them some tools to be your evangelists, and let them talk about your work. I'm trying to think if I have a quick free resource for you on that I can share, because I have talked about that a lot in other contexts. I can't think of anything right now. If I think of something, we'll send it out to everyone on the call. But definitely start with who you have access to right now, and who's going to care about the work, and how do you give them the opportunity to learn more about your organization and engage with you and collect email addresses, right? Like, there's so much that we think about in terms of needing to ask, but you need to also create collect email addresses, collect contact information, get to know people, be able to follow up. Yeah, so I hope that answered the question. It's a hard one to ask because it always depends, but I think if you go from that fundraising, from that matchmaking insight, it might help you, hopefully.
That's awesome, Cindy. Thank you. Yeah, that helps. So that's a good segue into talking about boards. So we've got questions about, should board members be required to give? How do we get board members to provide more assistance when it comes to fundraising? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Totally. It depends. So let me qualify that. A lot of us work in organizations where the board, so sorry about that. Someone hopefully will get the door. The perks of an office dog. So again, I want your board needs to feel successful. So meet them where they are. So if your board feels like most boards feel like, oh, they don't know anyone who can give $10,000. That's probably true. But do they know someone who can give $100 or $200? But even before that, before you're asking them, what can they be successful at doing? So can they, if you think about asking them to find the people who they know that might care about the work, how can you introduce them to the work? Take the ask off the table. Think of it as matchmaking. Who's going to be excited? Who can we come out for a tour, or like to volunteer serving a meal to our clients, or to go on a nature walk? Whatever the case may be, how do you get them to bring people out, and then how do you give those people a memorable, meaningful experience that is grounded in your mission? If all your board does is that, amazing. Because then you have all these warm introductions, people you know care, people who have a meaningful experience. You can start to ask them, and you can bypass your board. So thinking about meeting your board where they are, people will open up a lot more, and they'll do a lot more as you build success. So don't think about going from 0 to 100 overnight with your board. Should your board be giving? I hope so. I hope that they are so passionate about the work that you're doing that they can't help but give. And if they're not, then you need to figure out why. How much should they give? That is totally dependent on their capacity, age, stage, all those other factors. So I generally, in organizations I work with, don't put a minimum. I always ask people to think about a meaningful contribution. If it's $1, $100, $1,000, $10,000, whatever the case may be, I personally think that that should be very open. We work with a lot of social justice-based organizations where the board is deliberately reflective of the community, and that sometimes means not being able to give a lot. But can they give something? Probably, even if it's small. We know that people with lower incomes give a higher percentage of their income to charity. So it's not a, yeah, but if your board is not feeling the love and not feeling the passion to give, then you have bigger questions to ask around how to engage them in the work and the mission so that they are excited and want to be part of your solution.
Wonderful. Awesome. Okay, so Cindy, let's move on to a great question from Shannon, who wants to know, is there room in a small shop for, and we're just going to focus on one part of her question, cultivating major gifts from donors, and how would you go about doing that?
Totally. So I love major gift fundraising. I love all fundraising, but I love that relationship-based fundraising where you really get to know your donors and their passion. So for a small shop, again, it's looking at, is it right for you? So it's definitely a strategy. It definitely works in small organizations. Can you commit to doing the work that it takes to get there? So it's very relationship heavy. And sometimes the funds are more designated than undesignated, and sometimes that's challenging for smaller organizations. But yeah, I love it. There's totally a big place in my mind for major gifts in small shops.
Awesome. And so the other part of Shannon's question, which has also come up from some other folks, is being event driven and doing fundraising events. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because I know myself, when you're in a small shop, that's often one of the first things that comes up. Let's throw an event.
Yeah. Definitely. So, yes, what does it take to be successful at an event? And do you have those things? So events can mean a lot of different things. Like we just did, last night I did an event with an organization. We had 20 people. That was the goal, and it was amazing. And I just presented on this, as I mentioned before, where small events really give you the opportunity to connect with people in a meaningful way. Big events work too. So I think you just have to be clear around what the expectations are and who is helping drive that. So in my experience with small organizations, large fundraising events are very driven by volunteers who are getting sponsorships and selling tickets. Logistically, the organization can usually handle that, but traditionally they don't have the relationships to bring in table purchasers and sponsors, and we know that actually corporations are sponsoring events less and less anyways. So is it right for your organization? Do you have those assets in place that will help you be successful? What are the goals? So is it just to raise money? Looking at, if that's the case, how much money do you need to raise for it to be successful, for it to drive your work? Understanding the costs that go into it, including time costs. Do you, like, there's other outcomes that can come from an event. So are you asking people to give in the moment? Are you making that a meaningful opportunity so they're more likely to give again? So that you're building, actually, it's a donor acquisition tool. So there's so many variables and factors. But understanding, I think, like what level of event and what kind of outcomes you want to have will help you figure out if it's the right strategy for you.
That's great, Cindy. I love that you're bringing everything back to that strategy and that, question your goals, have your goal in mind, and bring it back to that, because we see it so often that small shops especially are pulled in so many directions. So being able to do that is amazing. So before we head on to our last question of the day, I'm going to just refer people back to the podcast, because there's so much good information there that you've been doing with your interviews that would be useful for people who are on the call today, not just fundraising, but many other topics as well, volunteering and governance and all sorts of awesome stuff. So I'm going to pop that in the chat box. And while I do that, Cindy, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about grants. The question that came in is, as we all know, doing grants is very time consuming. So is it worth it? And is there a way to streamline the process to kind of cut down on some of that work?
So maybe and maybe. Grants can be great. The biggest thing we see organizations not do is their homework when it comes to grants. So they might see a grant posted and then just send like an application or send a letter of intent or interest and just hope for the best. So, or in the efforts of saving time, they just think, I'm just going to send the same application or letter to like all these foundations and just wait. That is generally not the best strategy. With grants, in my experience, if there's an information session, go to it or attend the webinar. Make sure that you are doing the work to understand if it's the right fit before you start figuring out what the grant writing looks like. So it can be like they'll often list high level goals or objectives or what they're looking for, but if you attend a meeting or if you have a phone call, and definitely pick up the phone and talk to granting officers. They want you to be successful and they want to find great programs, and they're going to be honest with you if it's not a fit. So a little bit of extra legwork up front will help save you time. Going back to that idea of not everyone is there are plenty of fish in the sea. If it looks like a good grant on the surface, doesn't necessarily mean it's a great fit below the surface. So if you can uncover some of that, I think you will save a lot of headache and heartache, and then be really targeted in your applications. Hope that makes sense.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you, Cindy. I want to finish up here with a wonderful comment from Anne that I hope reflects how a lot of folks are feeling. Anne says, thank you for addressing the strategic thinking around this. I've realized I need to back up to go forward. And I think that's a great way of putting it. It's a great way.
I want to add one more thing, because this is something I do now every time I talk, because I know how isolating it is working on your own, and I heard from most of you that is you are the sole fundraiser, and you're not even the fundraiser in your organization. And there's statistics to show that if we tell ourselves we're going to do something, chances are we're not going to do it. I'm going to go for that run. I'm going to call that donor, whatever it is. We're not great at following up with ourselves. So if we tell someone else we're going to do it, we're 65% more likely to actually get it done. But if we tell them we're going to do it by such and such date, we're 95% more likely to get it done. So here is my offer to you. If you want to take this pledge, go online, fill in the very short form. Tell me one thing you want to finish in the next 2 weeks, and I will follow up with you in 2 weeks and check if you've done it. So that is my offer to all of you.
That's great, Cindy. Thank you so much. This has been so informative. Really appreciate it. Lots of great comments in the chat box. So yeah, really appreciate everyone joining in and being interactive today.
Fabulous. And we'll definitely look at those comments and see if they can inform any future podcast episodes.
Brilliant. And while we're on that topic, Cindy, next week is going to be our final episode of the Small Nonprofit Podcast for this year.
Yeah, definitely. All of you listen. We're so proud of it. And the feedback we've been getting has been phenomenal, which is, that there is a voice for small organizations that talks to your realities, and it's really practical, because we like practical.
Practical is good, but you're also having some great interviews on some pretty big, meaty topics too, though. So it's great. And don't be too disappointed, everybody. It may be wrapping up for this year next week, but I just confirmed with Cindy we're going to be back. I think it's January 21st for a second season. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we've got lots of new interviews already lined up. So be sure to subscribe wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. Get subscribed so you don't miss any of those episodes when they come out.
And there's like 14 or 15 for you to listen to right now. So there's lots to keep you busy over the holidays.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to sign off here, but before we do that, I want to remind everybody we're going to follow up with you by email tomorrow with the webinar recording. There will be a short survey there as well. It takes just a couple of minutes to fill out. I hope you'll complete that. You can let us know there if there's other topics you'd like to see in a future webinar as well. I also want to take a quick moment to remind you there's just one day left to fill out our 2019 Canadian Nonprofit Sector Salary and Benefits Survey. That's a bit of a mouthful, but the deadline is tomorrow. That's December 7th. So everyone who completes the survey is going to be able to pre-purchase the final report at a 50% discount. That'll be published early next year. You will also be entered to win in a prize draw of a $1,000 donation to a charity of your choice. So please fill out the survey as an individual about your own job in the sector, or if you're working in HR management, you can fill that out on behalf of multiple roles at your organization. I'll include a link to the survey in the email that you get tomorrow as well. So I do hope you'll consider completing that tomorrow. If there are those of you on the call today that have already filled out the report, thank you. We could not do this research without your participation. The other last thing I want to mention is we're wrapping up our webinar series for 2018 today. This is the last one for the year. So we want to thank all of you who register and participate in our sessions all year long. Of course, we want to thank our hardworking presenters as well. We'll be back with a bigger lineup, actually, for 2019, and we're kicking things off on February 7th with a session on government funding for training and hiring staff. So we'll include a link to
That's amazing!
Right? I know, yeah. Something all the small shops definitely will be interested in. Yeah. So we'll have a link to the webinar registration in the email tomorrow as well, in case you want to go ahead and get your spot for that session. So with that, thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone. I love all of your great feedback I'm seeing in the questions. So thank you.
Awesome. And we wish everyone, obviously, all the best this holiday season and going into 2019. Thanks for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Bye.